Okay, so today we're going to have a look at ellipses, ellipses in isometric specifically. So if we imagine that you have got a perfect circle like so, and that perfect circle would look maybe like this candle. Okay, so the base of this candle, just like so. As you start to turn it, obviously that turns into an ellipse depending on the different angles that you look at it from. Exactly the same process when it comes to isometric ellipses. So as you turn the candle more, this kind of thing gets a bit more squished until eventually it's super flat. Now, because of this being in a perfect face-on square, technically that's why it is circular. As soon as you start turning that square, that face starts to look like part of your isometric cube. So our isometric cube looking like this. You can imagine that one of those faces or that face has been turned at a different angle. Okay, it's not been turned perfectly over, it's been turned to an angle and then tipped basically, depending on how you look at it. So if we were to draw a perfect circle on there, that would look completely wrong. Now what's actually happening is this ellipse has a long axis, let's call that X, and a short axis, let's call that Y. Now, on our face, we've kind of got something similar. Now, this isn't a perfect art in terms of how I'm going to explain it, but it's sort of similar to help you think about it. So we've got a longer section from there to there and a shorter section from there to there. If you don't believe me, some people tend not to, you can see that that is 9.5 centimeters, and this one is 5.5 centimeters. Okay, so it is true, believe it or not. If we were to then draw a perfectly vertical line going through that cross and a perfectly horizontal line that's parallel to these going through that cross, we then have a nice kind of shape to work into. So this circle is being turned and put onto this face. Now we want our circle to touch there, to touch there, and to touch there, and to touch there. We also want it to touch along these lines, and it needs to be the same point along these lines. And we're going to pick a point. There is a technical way to do this, but for most of you, you can just pick a point, go vertically down to where that line meets, go horizontally across, make sure it's parallel to where this line meets, vertically up to where that line meets, and that should take me back to be in the right place. And I'm going to draw this very slowly to start with. All we're going to do is we're going to add curves that meet those together. Okay, all these curves will be tangential and meet as we go around. So from this point to this point, we want a curve that's then going to curve to there. So something like that. That's a nice smooth curve. This bottom part is also going to have a nice smooth curve as well. These curves, because of how it's oriented, are quite a bit tighter, as you can see. So the curve is going to be going like this. And on this one, the curve is going to be going like this. And as you can see, we have then got an ellipse on one of the faces. Now, because I've done that slowly and my points aren't perfect, it looks a little bit off, okay? But the basic principle of how you draw ellipses on faces, that is it. You don't want it to be a circle. You want to think about where the long axis is, like so, and where the short axis is, okay? And you want to try and build into that. Technically, they're offered a slightly different angle, but for most of our isometric sketching, this is going to work really, really well. And once you get more confident with it, you can kind of hover over and you can start building your ellipse onto that face. Okay, and you can see I've touched down the bottom, side, top, and I've also gone through those lines in roughly the right position. And you can do the same on the top as well. Okay, so to start understanding it properly, obviously use the technique that I've just shown you, having your vertical cross, having your horizontal line, same on the top. And the more you do this with your long axis and your short axis and your points, the more comfortable you will get with where your ellipse needs to go. And once you're happy, you can spend all of your time on the train, your time sitting on the beach, your time in meetings, your time in lessons, getting really comfortable with your ellipses, okay? And obviously I'm doing this quite quickly, it's not quite right, but you get the idea of how you can very quickly and easily build into your shapes. If you have a really long and a really narrow and tall cuboid, it won't work, okay? Because it's going to look a little bit strange. You need to think about making sure that it is square. So on this face, in terms of it being square, you need the same distance from here to here, which is probably about there, and vertically down, and then you can add an ellipse onto that part of it. Okay, this section just there. Same with this bit, that width to that height is probably somewhere about there. So we can put our ellipse in this part here. Okay, we couldn't do it completely vertically. All right, so just think about that when you are getting comfortable with your ellipses and how they work. So basic premise, make sure that you have got a face, make sure you find the long axis, so your x-axis going from here to here. Make sure you find your short axis, which will be in the opposite direction, pretty much perpendicular. You've then got your verticals and your horizontals. There are other lines you can draw in to be more technically accurate, but for now, let's just stick to that and then add your points where they need to be and then carefully sketch into them. Okay, mistakes that you might make is you might not make this bit tight enough. You might, as you are learning, you might make this line a bit wonky. You might make this line too flat. You might make this line too sharp. Who knows, okay? But understand where you're going wrong. Take your time to improve it and you'll be in a pretty good place. Again, same principles apply. Make sure that all of your initial lines are vertical. Make sure all of your lines going off to the right are all horizontal to each other, and make sure that all of your lines going off to the left are also parallel to each other, and you'll be in a really good, strong, solid position to be able to draw some nice ellipses.